Dr. Spina is going to come up and talk about early career change. I don't know who would ever let go of Dr. Spina, but I know he had an early career change, so looking forward to hearing your perspective.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks to the LSRS, and thanks for everybody showing up for the ICL. Nothing to disclose other than there is no perfect job. And so why does job matter, right? When we think about what burnout is, it's have you ever felt emotionally depleted, separate from being physically tired, viewed your patients as only objects, or to grade grass and felt that you were not accomplishing anything of value? And I ask all you guys to think about that because that thought goes through my head fairly often. Orthopedic surgeons have burnout symptoms 40 to 60% of the time. Risk factors are basically spine surgery, rigorous work hours, increased stress at work, financial concerns, growing job competition, right? This is a real problem for all of us in the audience. And as I went through residency, I never really got a lecture, or at least I don't remember getting a lecture on what to consider in a job, what are the important things to take away from. And when you look for your first job, it's quite daunting. The things that we often think are quite important is geography, right? Where does your partner want to live? Where do you want to live? Where's your family? The financial details of the job, you go from making, used to be $40,000 to $50,000 a year to these huge numbers, and you think that's really important. But you often don't ask yourself the really nitty-gritty details about the job. What are the resources? What are available? Are they modifiable? Is there a need for you? Is there a want for you? And where do you fit into the group? And so when you look at what's been written in the literature about what is important to people, obviously it is those things. It's geography in your first and second job. It's the practice type. Are you going to be in a hospital? Are you in a private group? Are you in academics? Family proximity is also important. And then you get down to the potential income, starting income, signing issues, and research opportunities are the least important things to people. So let's talk about my journey. This is me in my first job photo. I'm much younger, smiling, looking excited to start spine surgery. My partner wanted to be in the Pacific Northwest at the time. She's no longer my partner. Gen 2.0 came along, and now I'm married to another Gen from Alaska. But Gen 1.0 wanted to be in a certain area of the country, and so I was focused on trying to find a job in that area. I took a job at a large academic medical center. I was the only orthopedic spine surgeon at this hospital. I was filling the void of two ortho spine surgeons, one of which is sitting in the front row up here, that had left within the last 18 months. And I knew it was going to be a challenge. I talked to these people, but I'm built to suffer, so I thought it would be different. So I showed up and started booking cases, started trying to do things, and I realized that I only had 2 days of block a month. I realized that what I thought was going to be there was not there, and I started spinning my wheels. We go through training and we're just amped to do cases, and you get to your first practice, you're like, where are all the patients, right? You're just weeding through back pain, and my first case was an olecranon ORIF, something I really didn't see myself doing as a spine surgeon, but that was part of the ask of the job. And so when I was 6 months in, I'm making slow progress in terms of resources. I'm improving relationships with residents and trainees. They went from not wanting to do any more spine surgery to wanting to do a resident-only spine service with me. But I was still struggling to find OR time. I went to the chair. I said, hey, I really think I need to operate more than twice a month if I'm going to be a spine surgeon. He's, well, when do you want that? I said, well, now. And he said, well, let me try to find you some time. And that was on a Saturday. Try finding help to operate with you on a Saturday. It's quite a challenge. And so here I am sort of spinning my wheels. And then two of my mentors called me and said, hey, would you consider coming back to Utah? And so I was left with this decision. People took a chance on me. They gave me my first job. You had built personal relationships with your clinic staff, with the trainees. And did I really give it a fair shake, right? I'm only 6 months in, and I'm trying to figure out is this a long-term solution? And then I look at the other side of the coin, and I get to practice with 3 partners who trained me in fellowship under one roof. There were potentially options for more resources early. And I knew the job. And this was an extremely hard decision for me, but in the end, I left after a year. And the thing to remember is if you don't succeed at your first job, you're not alone. In this paper by Joe Loretta, who's a spine surgeon, published when he was a resident, but 51% of respondents left their first job within the first 5 years of practice. So over half of us. The most common reason for departure was financial, or the practice was not as advertised, right? And so you can do all of your research, you can talk to all the people you want to talk to, but until you're there, until your boot's on the ground, you really don't get a feel for what you're walking into. And so as I left my first job, I think this was an important time for me to reflect on what didn't work. You know, here you are as a first year, young spine surgeon, and you're trying to understand who you are as a person, who you are as a surgeon. What do you want out of a job? Really, everybody just wants a job, but what does that job mean for you? And I think it's also important to understand what the ask of that job is. What do they want from you? What is your vision for me going forward? And as I started, I really didn't have a clear grasp of who I was, what I wanted to be, what they wanted from me in my first thing. And that being said, I also didn't understand what resources I needed to be successful. So what did I need in terms of mentorship, in terms of partners, in terms of research support? And what was my research focus? So when I joined my first practice, they put me in a sort of outcomes think tank lab about writing grants. And I was a first year attending and really had no business applying for NIH grants. And so I spent one day a week sitting in this, thinking about ideas, writing AIMS sheets, and really it didn't do much for me early in my career, and it wasn't the right research focus. And so what was leaving a job? Well, it was having those difficult conversations, right? Talking to your partners, the people that hired you, that it's not a good fit. You feel like a jerk. You feel like you've let them down. And I think you just have to be honest. Honest about why you're leaving, honest about what you're looking for, honest about why it didn't work out, because probably somebody's going to backfill your shoes, right? There's another person who's going to come into that group, and if you can leave a place better than you started, you're doing a good job. For me, it meant delaying my boards collection. That's not a big deal. As you know, I just, instead of collecting in the first year of practice, I put it on the back burner and collected in my second year of practice. I think if you do good surgery with good indications, you really don't have to worry about that too much. One of the hardest things was letting patients know. Obviously, it's an interesting social contract to let somebody operate on you. They put a lot of faith in you, and now you're leaving a practice 3 months out from doing their surgery. So who are they going to follow up with, trying to build those things? The hardest thing was this idle time. A lot of institutions stop you from practicing, right? You're not allowed to operate about 3 months before you leave. You're still seeing patients in clinic and taking call, but how do you maximize that time? It's very easy to just say, oh, I have a 3-month vacation, but you're also starting a new job. So what tools can you build? What can you do in that time to be a better surgeon when you show up? And then there's the financial consequences of leaving. There's often things tied to signing bonuses and contracts. Do I have to stay out the year? What do I have to give back? And so all of that stuff is important as you leave your first job. And so in my second job, resources were tighter than I thought. I got to practice with great partners, now with Dr. Kraming as well. And it was an unbelievable group. But I was doing PM clinic from 1 to 6:30. You want to see when the crazies show up? It's Wednesday night. I had 1 day of block per week. And but what I did realize is who you practice with matters. And I have mentors still to this day that I work with, and it's a super fun place. And my research support was better. So as a takeaway, just to finish up, there's no perfect job. I think you have to be honest with yourself about who you are as a person, what you need, and that's different for everybody. Lean on your mentors, and if it doesn't work out, you're not alone. Thank you.